In this lecture, we'll take a look at some of the basic components of a Java program. Let's say I have some variable and I declare in a method, such as main, for example. I can only use that variable inside that one method. So what if we want to use this variable in other places? What if we want to use it in other methods and not just the method we declared it in? Well, we can't really do anything about it if we keep that variable declared in that method. So instead, we're allowed to declare variables outside of any method, but it still has to be declared inside of our class. You can't define a variable outside of a class. Java just doesn't let you do that. But you can declare it outside of any method. So the way we do this is we include the keyword static in front of our declaration statement. We normally use this for input stream objects, such as our scanner class, and for named constants. So we would normally declare these two types of variables outside of any particular method. So let's take a look at an example of these variables where we include the word static. So here's some code, and the two lines I want you to take a look at are these two right here. So we have static scanner console equals new scanner system.in. You should recognize that from our previous lecture. And then static final int number equals 12. So these are two quote-unquote variables that we declare outside of main, because here's our main right here. They're not declared inside that method. They're declared outside of it, but still inside our class. The only way we can do this is by including the word static. And what this means is I'm now allowed to use both console and number not only in main, but in any other method I have in my program. The next operators that we'll take a look at are increment and decrement operators. And these are some of the two most common operators that we do on variables. So let's say I have some integer variable and we'll call it count. If I want to increment it, well, I could just say count equals count plus 1. That will increase the value of count by 1 because on the right hand side, I do count plus 1. I take that result and I store it into count. So yes, that will work. An easier way would be to use the increment operator, which is just two plus signs that we tack on at the end of the variable. So for example, I can say something like count plus plus, and then a semicolon. Yes, I know that T looks pretty bad, but it is count with two pluses at the end. Now, if I want to decrease the value of a variable by 1, we can use the decrement operator, which would be minus minus. So just as we have count plus plus, I can do something like count minus minus. Let's see if this looks a little bit better. Count minus minus. And then our semicolon. So we can do something like that to increment or decrement the value of a variable. Now, there are two different forms for both the operators. There's a pre and a post form. And we just showed one example in the last slide of one variation of it. So for example purposes, let's say we have x be an integer variable. The pre-increment form would be if we have the two plus signs in front of the x. And what this means is that we increment the value of x before we use it in our expression. Post-increment, which is what I drew on the previous slide, is where we have the two plus signs after x. And what this means is we use x in its current form in the expression, and then when that line is done, then we'll increment x by 1. And then similar to the decrement operators, there is a pre-decrement, which means that we would decrease the value of x before we use it in the expression, and then a post-decrement form, which is where we have the minuses after the x. And this means we use x as its current value in that line, and then when we're done, we would decrease the value of x. So let's take a look at an example of using our increment operators. So let's say we have a and b, and they're integer variables, and let's say we have the lines a equals 5, so we assign 5 to a, and we have the line b equals 2 plus a, where a is incremented. So the first line, well, we just take the value 5, and we store it in a. So at the end of the first statement, a is 5. It's kind of obvious, but let's look at the second statement. So because the two plus signs are in front of the a, that means that we're incrementing a before evaluating the expression. So what that means is A was originally 5, but now it's incremented to 6. So we take 2 plus 6, which is 8, and we store that in B. So B becomes 8. Now, what if we had it the other way? What if we had A plus plus instead of plus plus A? That means A would be incremented after the evaluation. So that would mean that since A is 5 before incrementing, it'd be 5 plus 2, which is 7. And then when the line is done, A would increment at that point. So B would become 7 and A would be 6.